Oh, that's not good.
You work for it.
No. Which one do I need to press this? No. Last one?
Well, GTA.
I surrender. You tell me what to do. So it's going to be the classic next slides, please. Yeah. All right, so I'm Saul. I'm from TNE, but I will be presenting the platform for electromobility position on fleets today. Next slide, please. So you know that the platform for electromobility represents about 45 members from all modes of transport and along the whole value chain of electromobility. Look at that wonderful animation. This shows that we are made up of civil society, NGOs, urban environment, cities, rail, the final users, and whatnot. So the whole value chain, the whole ecosystem, and the mission is that we're trying to develop solutions to electrify transport in Europe, and we are trying to present those solutions to the European institutions to move forward in the path of zero emissions. So the starting point that we are going to be using today is, well, the Clean Vehicles Directive. As you know, the Clean Vehicle Directive, also known as CVD, well, paves the way for a deployment of electric vehicles in public fleets in Europe. And public fleets is important because, of course, it doesn't cover all fleets. So it's a very good first step in the right direction, but it has a little, some challenges. First, because it is a directive, of course, it is subject to transposition, and therefore it might be interpreted differently across member states. We might end up seeing different speeds in the adoption with the transposition. For example, this map here shows the status that we had at the beginning of the summer, where a few countries, like Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands and Ireland were on track with the transposition. Some others, like France and Croatia, had already finalized the transposition, but we had no data from most of the rest of the countries, and our group was also delayed. So that's one challenge, but then the other, and that's what we will be focusing on today, is that the CVD only covers 1% of corporate fleets, because it is focusing primarily on public procurement of fleets, which grossly means buses. So there's a whole segment of transport sector that is not being covered by the CVD. So we need to go beyond this, and we need to take more steps. Next, please. So we're talking about corporate fleets a lot today, and I would like to explain what we mean by corporate fleets with this slide. So the definition would be something like any vehicle owned or leased by a private company or organization, and that is used for business purposes. That would be a fleet vehicle. And we can identify several types of corporate fleets. For example, you can have taxi and PHVs. You can also have company cars, the standard vehicle that you would get as part of your contract, as a perk in your salary and benefits. You also have rental car fleets, you have delivery fleets, you have captive fleets, you have true fleets. There are many other definitions. But the thing is, the key here is that all those fleets are not covered by the CVD. So what do we do? Next, please. When you analyze the average mileage that a company car in a corporate fleet is driving, you see that they drive 2.25 times further every year than a private vehicle. A private vehicle in Europe drives on average 12,000 kilometers per year. Company car drives 500,000 kilometers. Those are the average figures. So what this means is that even though as part of the total car park, they're only 20%, only 2 out of 10, because they are driven much more, they have higher emissions. This is the bar that you see here to the right of the slide. They represent 50% of emissions of the whole road transport segment. Only 20% of the car park, but 50% of emissions. So this, on top of this, you have another key aspect, and it is that company cars, they drive the market for new vehicles. They are 60% of new car registrations. In some countries, like Poland, Germany, they go even beyond 60%. But on average, it's about 60-ish% of new registrations. So what this means is that corporate fleets are a low-hanging fruit, because with only a few selected measures, you can target a massive amount of vehicles, and you can steer the market towards cleaner powertrains by putting in place the right measures. But there's a problem, and it's we don't have a specific plan, we don't have a specific regulation or regulatory framework at the moment for these fleets. So nothing's being done, well, maybe not nothing, but something more should be done. Next, please. This nice slide here, what this shows, the story I want to convey here is that we have a set of rules and regulations right now that are driving the supply of electric vehicles into the market. We want companies, we want manufacturers to supply clean vehicles. So we have put in place a series of regulations, notably the CO2 emissions regulations. But we are not acting yet on the demand side. So what we are proposing at the Platform for Electric Mobility is a ZEV fleet regulation, a zero-emission vehicle fleet regulation. So you drive demand. What you can do here is you match the supply that you are pushing into the market via the the car CO2 regulation with the demand that would be secured by big fleets. And this will have a trickle-down effect that is very important because, like Euroelectric just pointed out, the average holding period of these vehicles are usually between 36 to 48, perhaps 60 months. So 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years after a new electric vehicle has been registered as a company car, it will reach the second-hand market. And this is very important because this is where the average Jane and Joe in Europe buy vehicles. The average European buys used cars. So by tackling the company car issue and providing clean electric vehicles into those fleets, you will help the average European buy an affordable, clean vehicle in 3-4 years' time. That's the key about the proposed ZEV fleets regulation. Next slide, please. And you can see here that there is a missing link in the fleet electrification strategy in Europe. You have some measures on the supply side, for example, the emissions performance standards for vans and GVs, also for HGVs, trucks. You also have some proposals on the infrastructure side. We have the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, hopefully soon a regulation. We have the EPBD, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. You have the TANT. You have the Urban Mobility Package with the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans. On the use side, you have the Eurovignette, you have the Urban Mobility Package, including the vehicle access regulations in urban environments. And on the demand side, you have the Clean Vehicles Directive, which, like I said, is having a major impact on public procurement, so public fleets, buses, and so on. But something's missing. So what do we do with these corporate fleets? There's also a major reason why we need to act now, very quickly, and why we are proposing a regulation. It's if we check out the timeline of the next decade, next 2-3 decades, and having the Green Deal goals in mind, if this decade we enable the policies and the laws needed to have a progressive electrification of corporate fleets, with the goal of having 100% of new procurement in fleets by 2030 with clean vehicles, then that means, because they are driven on average 3 to 4 years, maybe 5, that means that by 2035, the last internal combustion engine from a corporate fleet will be entering the used car market. And then they can be driven up to an additional 10-15 years. So if we want to be carbon neutral by 2050, 2030 is the last date to sell internal combustion engine vehicles in company car fleets. That's when 100% of new vehicles in fleets should be electric, 2030. And that is what we're proposing, as we can see on the next slide. What we want is a regulation that harmonizes the European market by preventing risks of increased gaps between member states during implementation. So regulation, not directive. We want a harmonized approach. And we want a mandate to be put on companies to decarbonize their vehicle fleets in accordance with the Green Deal's objectives. And we need to do that with a gradual approach to reach that 100% by 2030. So that means that we need to set different targets for specific market segments and for industries. It will not be the same situation for a taxi fleet, for example, than for a company that is operating in the logging industry. It's not the same type of fleet, so we should have different targets and different timelines. But overall, that is the proposal, that 100% of new company cars by 2030 are electric. And I think we have another slide, maybe it's just a thank you slide. It's a thank you slide. So that's it. Very quickly summarized the proposal of the platform for electromobility. Thank you.